Welcome back to this special Facebook Live broadcast celebrating Harry Chapin's 75th birthday here on December 7th. And we have a wonderful guest, Drey Samuelson, who's joining us now. How you doing today, Drey?
I'm doing just fine, Bill. Thanks.
Doing great. And Drey's in Washington and has a great background, some great stories of interaction with Harry, but how he impacted so much of what he's done over life. Starting out, I guess maybe we kind of go back to when your younger days and how it all kind of got started when you heard Harry and had the little interaction with Rolling Stone, from what I understand.
Yeah. So I heard Harry first in the early 70s when Taxi came out, which I loved. It was such a beautiful song, and it was so wistful. It really spoke to me. And I liked his music, but it took me a while, I guess, to tune into who he was as a human being. And maybe, I don't think he didn't express himself as a human being in the really early parts of his career. And I think, as I understand it, maybe in the mid-70s, he sort of came into his own in terms of his idealism. And when he did that, it really spoke to me in a way that his music, I always loved his music, but his music didn't inspire me. He inspired me. And that's how I sort of came around to really appreciating who Harry Chapin was as a human being.
And so from that, how did that transform your life? I know you kind of been involved in some of the political world out there in Washington, D.C. and at times, as well as other things you're doing now.
I believe that when people make significant sacrifices, it has the effect oftentimes of inspiring other people. And when I started to read about Harry in Rolling Stone and other magazines about how he was spending so much of his time and so much of his money on anti-hunger causes, I always cared about that issue, but I didn't really, the thought of somebody doing what Harry did never really occurred to me. And I think when you see somebody else doing something that's significant, then you oftentimes get inspired by it. I think we have a tendency to live in our own little silos too often, and until we see someone else doing something that's extraordinary, we just stay in our silos and we don't do much. But what Harry did was he attempted and he succeeded in drawing many of us out of our silos, and he certainly drew me out of my silo.
Talk a little more about that. How did he draw you out of your silo, and as far as your involvement?
I think just from reading about him, and I always cared about political advocacy, but Harry Belafonte said it very well in a video that I saw just the other day. He talked about what Harry did was akin to tossing a pebble into a quiet pond and watching the ripples spread from there. This may sound corny, but I think I'm one of Harry's many ripples.
Right.
And I think that that was, I'm just a ripple of Harry, and I'm certainly not the only one by any means. There are thousands of us out there. But I give Harry a great deal of credit for, and I never met him. I never saw him perform, but I read about him, and I found that just so inspiring that it did have a significant.
Now, you did some work with Senator Tim Johnson, right?
Yes, I did. I was his chief of staff. I ran his first campaign in 1986, and I stayed as chief of staff for 28 years. I'm a perfect example of the Peter principle. I rose to my level of incompetence.
So, and from that, you've also kind of expanded beyond that realm, and you are a co-founder of TakeitBackorg. What's that all about?
So I formed after 28 years, and Tim decided to retire from the Senate, and I decided to retire with him. A friend of mine, Rick Weiland, and I from South Dakota decided we were going to start our own nonpartisan nonprofit to try and see if we could use ballot initiatives to try and fix some of the political problems that we have in this country. So that's what we did. And that's what we're doing. We're using ballot initiatives right now in South Dakota, but we hope if we have some success there to move on to other states as well.
Wow, that's one of those fundamental things that probably a lot of us don't even think about, but how important it is for those kind of initiatives to take hold, because it really represents a lot of what Harry talked about, right? Being a participative, be a participant in the whole democratic process.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Harry believed, to my understanding, and I'm sure that this is right, he wanted not just to deal with symptoms, he wanted to deal with causes. There's a lot of hunger organizations that, do good things. They give food to people that need it. But as I understand what World Hunger Year does, is they try to deal with the causes. I saw a video that Harry talked about. He said if there was a car that exploded upon contact and people were getting burned, we could deal with it by having the best burn units and the best ambulances and the best doctors. But why not try to stop the damn cars from being built that didn't explode upon?
Right.
And I mean, to me, that's exactly what needs to be done, and that's what I'm trying to do with my buddy. So that's
right.
Our whole dynamic that we're trying to affect.
And do you think that whole idea that, hey, everybody can participate and make a difference, is that probably as important today as it ever was?
Oh, I think it's more important today. It's always been important. I mean, we live in a democracy, but the democracy only works if the people engage in it. And it's scandalous, frankly, in this country that about half the people don't vote. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. But Harry's message about was absolutely right. We have to be involved. I mean, Harry wasn't just somebody that believed in anti-hunger causes alone. I mean, he believed that people need to be participants in our democracy, and that's exactly how I see it.
Right. So on the ballot initiatives, how are you going about deciding which ones to focus on? Is it all about kind of fundamental structure things to help people get represented more fairly types of issues?
Principally, we want to get people. One of our ballot initiatives is to vote by mail, so it makes it more convenient to vote, makes it easier for older people to vote, single parents to vote, handicapped people to vote. It also saves taxpayer money. Another initiative that we had this last cycle was to make it so that we would elect people on a nonpartisan basis. I think the partisan system in this country is killing us. And I believe that if we could elect people on a nonpartisan basis, which we do for the legislature in my home state of Nebraska, then we would take the partisanship out of politics and have people try to solve problems rather than try to beat the other party. And it doesn't work. And we have to try something different. So that's something we're trying to promote.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing where its time has come, right? It's like we keep trying to find these ways to divide us rather than hey, let's figure out what the problem is and come together and work on it.
No, that's absolutely right. One of the problems I think, and I'd just like to read one paragraph of this that I think is relevant to. When I was working for Congressman Tim Johnson in 1991, the 10th year anniversary of Harry's death, I persuaded my boss, Congressman Tim Johnson, to introduce a statement in the congressional record honoring Harry. And I think this cuts to the key that I think truth of Harry Chapin. And I'll just read this very quickly. What separated Harry Chapin from many people is that he defined family differently than its conventional definition. Although he had his own family that he cherished, he also knew that in the ultimate sense, we are all family. That, I believe, was the real meaning of his life. Because if we realized that we were all family, we wouldn't tolerate the fact that 1 out of 8 children in this country go to bed hungry. We wouldn't tolerate the fact that in this world, there are hundreds of people starve every day. And I think that if there was one message that Harry had, and he probably had many, but that was sort of, if you're going to boil it down, I think I would boil it down to that we are all family. Even if we're not nuclear family, we're all family, and we have to treat each other like we're all family.
Wow, I remember reading that, gosh, years ago now. I'm so glad you read that because it's like that really does put it, in total, just distillation of what it's all about. So thank you for doing that. I'm glad you brought that up. All right. Well, Drey, really appreciate you spending some time with us and helping celebrate and honor what Harry was all about. And thank you for all you're doing, and particularly with TakeitBackorg. That sounds like just an awesome concept and idea, something we probably sorely need in this country.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm very deeply honored to be here. And thanks to everybody that helped put this on.
Thank you. All right. So coming up, we've got a few more interviews that we're going to be setting up here in just a few minutes. In the meantime, feel free to cruise on over to betterplacetobe.org, and you'll see all kinds of interesting things, some memorabilia, as well as just other information on how to sign up for our email news blasts and all that. And we'll be back in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.